Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Full Quota Podcast. My name is Mpho and Tim. I've got Tim Delace here with me. We're the co-hosts of the Full Quota Podcast. It is a podcast, South African cricket podcast. Number one comes out every week on a Monday or a Tuesday, depending on how things are. We like to be flexible like that. We also like to do emergency podcasts. If there's any drama that you'd like to know about, just wait a few hours and we'll pop out a podcast. But that's what we do. That's what we do. We love cricket. We watch cricket. If you'd like to advertise on our platform, please do so. We're on YouTube. We're on Facebook. We're on Twitter. We are also on Apple Podcasts as well as Anchor and Spotify. We're everywhere. We're everywhere. And in the spirit of Apple Music, we're in Apple Podcast, Apple Music. Well done to the Kansas City Chiefs on winning the Super Bowl. Well done to Rihanna on announcing her pregnancy, or a second one, and a great Super Bowl show, halftime show. I know Tim supports the Tampa Bay Bucks, but yeah, I've got my second ring. Well, the Chiefs have their second ring in like 4 years, so that's great for me. But we don't talk NFL. I'm a little bit tired, but we're going to get through because we had SA20. There was a bit of an after party, and then after that, it was Super Bowl. So I'm high on some sort of whatever it is, but I do drug-free sports, so don't worry about that. I'm now digressing. Anyway, Tim, how are you doing?
I'm doing good, but I'm doing good. All good. I did not go to the after party. I did not watch the NFL for obvious reasons, and I went to bed very early. Otherwise, good.
Yeah, good. So obviously, SA20 gave us a massively entertaining final week. We had two semi-finals. You also had a final that was rained out, and then we played on the reserve day, which was a successful use of the reserve day, I think. I think the Sunday afternoon at the Wanderers was just beautiful. It was like World Cup final type of full at the Wanderers, which was great. But we obviously saw the Sunrisers Eastern Cape coming up against the Pretoria Capitals. The Pretoria Capitals were the informed side. They won 8 games out of 10. And they got to the final, and somehow, by somewhere, that was the day that they were going to stumble. And they stumbled very badly. Sunrisers Eastern Cape, congratulations on winning the first inaugural SA20. Tim, what did you make of the final? And maybe even talk about the two semi-finals, because the one really broke my heart. But yeah, what did you make of that final?
I knew it was possible that the Sunrisers could win. I knew that they had a chance. This is the nature of T20 cricket. It really was a giant versus it was favourite versus the underdog in terms of a final. It wasn't two top teams that had been playing at their top level. It was a team that had been knocking everybody out of the park in terms of the Capitals, and a team that had started poorly but were coming together at the back end, and they came together at the right time. It had everything. It had everything, that final. Even when the Capitals didn't make enough runs on the board, particularly when you're playing at the Highveld, you think at the halfway mark, that is going to be tough to defend. Right up until that last over, they had a chance. Right up until the very last over, they were in the game right to the end. So all those people that bought tickets undoubtedly got their money's worth, whoever they were supporting, whether they were neutral or whether they were supporting a particular side. It had everything. It was, for an inaugural final, it really ticked all the boxes, and it actually showed not only the ability for South Africa to host a world-class tournament, but the local talent that South Africa has. South Africa often gets told, oh, once you go past Miller, there isn't that talent there. There's not enough guys coming through for X, Y, and Z. This competition, and the Sunrisers in particular, showed that that's not the case. In fact, it's the complete opposite.
Yeah, look, I think speaking about the Sunrisers, I think they're a case of obviously local is lekker, to use the South African phrase. Obviously, the internationals weren't necessarily well known. but they didn't come to the party as much as you would have liked. And you saw contributions from a lot of South Africans. Yes, in that final, Adam Rossington was the guy who finally came good. There were questions around his selection throughout the tournament. He had like one innings of note, but it wasn't a couple of innings. And to a certain extent, that entire Sunrisers team, all of them had one innings of note, bar Tristan Stubbs. And all of them like pitched in the games that they won. Obviously, Temba had the 50 against Joburg Super Kings in a losing effort. Rossington was early in the tournament. Aidan Markham that 100 at Centurion in the semi-final that effectively, put him in another sphere. And I hope that unlocks Aiden the limited overs batter, because I think South Africa needs a guy who can do that type of a performance that takes teams away. You also had guys like Marco Jansen who pitched in, and so it kind of felt like it was everybody else came through at the right time for them. And to the Pretoria Cap, but let's stop on the Sunrisers. When you looked at them, obviously they came in third. They beat the number 2 team in the Joburg Super Kings in a run fest in Pretoria, and you kind of felt that then it clicked. But when we walked into the final, I thought they've been up and down. Could they have peaked too soon? And that 220 that they put up was the peak of their tournament, and it was going to be a damp squib in the final.
There was that risk. There was that risk when you look at the firepower that the Capitals had in their arsenal, and we'll get into that team just now. But it's that togetherness that they've created within that side. And Markham and Adrian Burrell need to take huge credit for that, because, as we said, they needed certain guys to pitch up. They needed certain guys. It wasn't a case of if one guy does everything, they can win it. It wasn't that.
Yeah.
That wasn't going to pull them through, like other teams have had. That wasn't going to pull them through. Par Royals. If Josh Butler had made runs at the semi-final, they could have been in the final, regardless of what anybody else had done. This team needed a team effort. It needed everybody to contribute, and as you rightly point out, everybody contributed. And even in the final, when it got squeaky bum time, it needed somebody to just calm heads. Marco Jansen was the man for the calm heads. Those boundaries to hit off Bosch at the end, those were not hacks. Those were stroke plays. Those were over cover and shots that were made in control. The situation was tense, but he remained in control throughout that little period. So that's why they won it for me. That's why they were, because they played as a team. Nobody said, it's my show. It is the Sunrisers show, not my show.
Yeah, you kind of felt like Mark Nicholas spoke about it at the presser, like in the presentation. The sum of the parts of this team was greater than the whole. And to a certain extent in the preview, I think with Vanna, we kind of ended up on there in terms of everybody needs to pitch in. They're all very young. They're all the future of South Africa. And because we don't know the internationals, a lot of the stuff's going to be reliant on all of them coming together and pitching together. It wasn't necessarily like the other teams where you were reliant on Josh Butler or Morgan or somebody, or Jason Roy, or with the Capitals, it was Will Jackson, Phil Salt. If they take those English people out of the Pretoria Capitals, they look like, the Pretoria Nobodies or the Pretoria Republicans. I don't know what else the antithesis of Capital is. Or like a Faf du Plessis at the top of the order, a Reza Hendricks, a Yanaman Malan, who never came through in this tournament. And so that's essentially what it was. And it kind of speaks to Aiden's captaincy, and we'll talk about that. The other side of the coin, the Pretoria Capitals, the team that lost, they looked unstoppable. They looked unbeatable. The one game they lost was at the Wanderers against the Jersey Super Kings, and then they lost obviously in a Heino class and master class contender for performance of the tournament, 100 revenge game 100 essentially, or we're not going home 100 type of vibe. That they still even got close in that game. In both games, actually got pretty close. To think about it, was like the thing is, I think in a lot of sports, a lot of these teams we saw in basketball, the Golden State Warriors, they had a 73-9 season, record-breaking season, going on to lose the NBA Finals. You've watched the 17-0 Patriots or 16-0 Patriots going on to actually then losing the Super Bowl to the Giants. I'm talking about American things, but it kind of bears fruit even in the IPL, RCB, that type of a team. Great regular season guys, but when it comes to the playoffs, you just fall apart. Even in World Cups, you've watched teams build up a resume only to be beaten in a semi-final. And that was India in the previous World Cup in Abu Dhabi. India did quite well coming through the game through the quarterfinals, through the regular season, and then all the what is it the group stages, and then falling at the end. Was it that for the Pretoria Capitals? Was it? It's a law of averages, Murphy's law. You can't go and win everything. There was always going to be a point where you were gonna just stumble.
I have to say that it is one man and one man only. As good as they continued to play once he left, and as good as they sort of patched it up, if you like, I think not having Will Jacks was absolutely vital, and that's not making any disservice to the players that played for him, like Mendes had a really good tournament. In his 7 games that he played, he was striking at nearly 150. So he did exactly what you would ask. But I just think that they missed a spark from him. They needed that match winner. Mendes was a contributor. Jacks is a match winner. That's the difference for me.
And he's the type of guy that can nullify Roelof van der Merwe when Roelof starts getting going.
His strike rate for the tournament is far better than anybody else's. His strike rate is over 200.
Yeah,
it's over 200. That's just insane. The average for the tournament is around 130. That's for the tournament. It's around 130. And his is 200. That's just it's phenomenal. He hardly failed. I think he failed in the second game. He made a 6, but outside of that, I think he made runs in every single game that he played, and he went from ball 1, which you need to do in this tournament. I think in the high felt on that pitch where they clearly didn't get enough runs. Yes, of course he could have got out second ball to a good delivery. That's quite possible. That's the nature of the format. But I think if he'd got himself in 10, 12 balls, it would have been curtains at halfway mark. They would have got to 200, and that would have been it. Finished and clear. Thanks for coming. And it was interesting
because AB mentioned that. They were asking him about, obviously, the guy coming in at number 5 and what he's thinking. And he was like, no, give yourself about... He was like, say, he said 10 for 10. So 10 runs and 10 balls. And then you accelerate, which a lot of the viewers and a lot of the social media people didn't like. I was like, oh, this is quite interesting. AB de Villiers is telling people to effectively in people's waste 10 balls, but it's not wasting it at 100 strike rate, but you know what I mean. And I thought about, and as you mentioned, obviously you need and that was the type, and that's what the Wanderers always is. If you looked at the Riza and the Faf innings at the Wanderers, it was always they took their time up front because bowling in the power play was really tricky at the Wanderers, and then after the power play you could then actually put down runs, and the power score was just above 160, and they got to about 136. They needed 15 runs, and to a certain extent, about midway through that at 15 overs in that final, I thought they were going to get there because I remember in the semi-final they got to 170 from similar position, and that was just enough to get over the Paul Royals. So it was a game of fine margins, and you kind of feel like a player like Will Jacks gets you there. Riley is a question mark. I think something that we need to talk about, maybe from a pro perspective, maybe from another day, because they just went 4-4-4 out. And we're like, dude, like What are we doing? But anyway, let's talk about the man of the moment, the man of the weekend, the man going into this new era. Because remember, we're in the start of the new era in South African cricket in terms of the national setup. And so maybe it's a clean slate, blank slate. I don't know. Aiden Markram winning MVP. Does that hold weight nationally? Does obviously remember we spoke about it in our previous show that obviously if he managed to win this, it would be a massive tick for his a captaincy nod. Because obviously everyone's assuming that we're going to get new captains, and even yesterday in the center, in the media center, there were like rumblings around whether there's a new captain or whether they were announced. They were not announced. I don't want to be aggregated. It's just people are thinking like that right now, especially with the West Indies on the horizon and the Netherlands coming up. It's a good way to change things with the World Cup at the end of the year. What did you make of Aiden Markram's tournament? I'll give you my thoughts afterwards. And also, is he a shoe-in now? Or are you going to consider him captaincy? I saw a tweet that said he should captain all formats. What do you make of that?
No. Obviously not. Obviously getting ahead of him or herself with that tweet, which is understandable after such a good final. But no. Look, without going over old quotes that I've had over the last, certainly the last 6 or 7 weeks about Markram, talent has always been there. He's never quite cracked it as much as he should have. That's not to say he hasn't done well. At times he has done magnificently. He just hasn't quite lived up to the hype that we expect from him. That being said, this was a tick-all-box situation. Will he be able to lead a team that is predominantly focused on local players and make them competitive? Tick. Will he make that pressure not affect his batting? Tick. Will he still be a force with his bowling, which has been an incredibly important asset for the Proteas in this format? Tick. All 3 ticks, all done. Everything is done. He's done his side of the story. He's done his bit. He can't now do any more. He's now played in the international tournament with some of the world's best players against quality opposition in tense situations. He has been batting when the team are losing, when the team look like they're going to lose. He's gone out there, he's made 150 odd balls. That is substantial. He has done everything that Shukri or Rob could have asked of him. If they said to him, go out and do these things, these are the things they would have asked him to do. He cannot possibly have done any more than he has done. So I could see him. I'm not saying this is going to happen, but I could see him becoming the Proteas T20 captain. It is a possibility if they go in a different direction. I don't know if that is. So don't put words in my mouth. I don't know if that's going to happen. I'm just saying, if that's the direction they want to go in, they've got now a genuine. Instead of having somebody with obvious talent, you've got somebody with substance. Somebody who has lived in difficult situations. He's delivered in an international tournament against quality opposition. You can't ask any more from that from anybody, not just from Mark, but from anybody. So from that perspective, could he get a nod at the next level? Absolutely. What we want as a fan, though, is we want this to transfer across the formats. This has to transfer across now. Not just in this format. Not just in a franchise. Not just domestically. It needs to. He's now touching 30. It's time to say, this is my position. I want to take advantage of it. It's up to who the powers that be, what they do with that. But as I said, I've said about 4 times now, he can't have done any more than he's done in this tournament. Let me just get here. I'm going to go.
He's averaged 30.
average of 33, strike rate just under 130,
That's
and
good.
average of 14, the economy of 6 as with the ball, with
With
11
11
wickets.
wickets. Yeah.
Perfect.
It's look, and I think that's what can help with the balance. He can be one of those guys who can help with the balance from a national side in the T20 sphere, and we saw that in the World Cup a little bit. I do think he's a number four, and I think it kind of suits him in that role. With David Miller coming in at five, and I think you can pencil those guys in. I think the bigger question, obviously, was the guy at six, and I don't think we've answered that a lot. I think currently it has to be Hannah Clausen, but from an Aiden Markram perspective, he has. If people think I'm a hater, he has silenced me. I thought that 100 at Centurion was world class. I thought it was unbelievable, and he batted out of his skin. And if he can keep on batting like that, because essentially, to me, when I looked at that 100, I was like, that was what we wanted. The problem is the greats can consistently do that to you. You saw that with Faf, with a consistent 90, high 90s and everything else. You saw that with Josh Butler. You saw that with Will Jacks. You need Aiden to be in that realm in this tournament because I don't think, even in season two, with the squad that they have, I don't think they're going to they could get far. They were very close to being fourth, and obviously there were a couple of situations that played in their favor, and that speaks to Aiden's captaincy. But to a certain extent, that's what the Sunrisers missed was a consistent run getter. Yes, Aiden's there; he's in the top five run scorers, and that was great. It was that 100. But if you look at the guys around him, they put down runs. They and he put down runs, and I don't want to say he didn't, but you'd want him to be the number one run scorer in this tournament for the talent that he has. Because if you look at that top five, from a talent perspective, I think he's the most talented there. Outside of Quinton de Kock, because I think Quinton is all worldly, and that says a lot because I think Josh Butler's good too, but I think Aiden has it in his locker to be even better than him. And obviously, we know Heinrich Klaassen. Heinrich Klaassen is a guy who's worked hard. He's got a talent. If Heinrich Klaassen had the talent that Aiden Markham had, Heinrich Klaassen would have probably been in the Proteas side for these past 7 years and have scored about 4,000, 5,000 runs, across, well, even 6,000 runs across all formats. That's the type of and so everything's there. The package is there. You just want consistency across the board. You want that type of a performance because that's the type of stuff AB de Villiers gave you. You know, AB de Villiers never like he'd either get out for naught or he'd get out for something significant. You want significant runs, and so that's essentially what my thing is. And if you want to make him T20 captain, by all means, I think it's a nice move. I don't know about one day internationals, but knowing South African selectors, we like to pick cross formats. So I wouldn't be surprised if they're like, hey, take ODIs too. The only issue, obviously, is that he hasn't scored a century for the national team in one day internationals. Timber has three, just to give you a reference. He hasn't, and I think he scored like a 90. And so that's the because he scored like a 90 in Sri Lanka. It was a really 2 years before it was before the first T20 World Cup in 21. It was really nice. It was a really nice thing, but you want it consistent. You don't want it to be in sporadic. And I think for me, that's the only thing I could say. Maybe he needs to kind of work on. But from this tournament, unbelievable performance. I see why they made him MVP. And we're going to talk about that later. But yeah, he has shut me up. I'll take that 100%. And I want him to shut me up even more because if he does that, it means the Proteas are going to win games. That's essentially what it means. So, Aiden, go forth and conquer, my man. Well done. You have my attention. Well, you had my attention many years ago. You lost it. I'm still not owning your stock. However, others are owning your stock. So please do make them happy. I'm still a little jittery, but in this T20 format, yeah, it's your thing. It works for you. Okay, Tim, that's final out. That's everything out. Let's talk about the awards. So we decided to kind of have a bit of a award show on the back end of the show, just to spice it up, have a little bit of fun. So I think the first award here, Tim, that we have is the surprise package of the tournament. This is a player or a team that has surprised you, that's gone over and above and have surprised you? What was your surprise package of the tournament?
I'm going to go slightly differently to our chat pre this podcast. I hope you don't mind. Because we have discussed sunrises in great deal. They were going to
Yes.
be my surprise, but we have discussed them in great deal already. So my surprise, which is a little bit unusual because I have always been a fan of his, but he's been able to hit and miss since he's come back to South Africa. He has performed. He has shown that the genuine talent that is there, but not on a consistent level. But I think for me, the surprise package is Lewis Deploy, and I'll explain why. I'll explain why. Because he came into this JSK side not in great form, not having great tournament in the SA20, and I didn't really light any fires at all. Now, if you pick 5 or 6 guys at the tournament, he isn't there, and he should be. He absolutely should be there for his talent. When JSK were desperate for runs, when JSK was struggling, when Faf du Plessis was getting a little bit frustrated because nobody was contributing, nobody was helping him out, and JSK were actually one more loss and they were pretty much out of the competition. That's how squeaky bum it came. And he made 270s, if I've got my stats right. And the way he played them, he's always been, you get this tone of a 360 player. He's always been that. He's always been a 360 player. He's always had the ability to hit all around the ground. He likes to hit switches, switch hitters, reverse sweeps, the scoops, the lot. So he's had moments in this competition where the pressure's been on. Faf du Plessis has been out. They've had to score runs. They've had to get totals, and he has delivered. One of the games I remember him making, I think it was a 70 or 41, if my numbers are correct. And it was just the way he played it. He made it look as if it was really, really simple. But it was anything but simple. So for me, he'll be disappointed, I no doubt, because he is that sort of character that he didn't do more. But there we go. Against my Town, he made 81 not out in a must-win game, if I remember correctly. And
That was a good innings.
yeah, and then a 75 not out early on in the tournament. Yeah, the 81 was a magnificent innings because it had, statistically, even though they had a poor tournament, statistically, the best bowling lineup in the competition. We know the names, but in terms of the competition, they lived up to it. My Cape Town lived up to being a good bowling team. And he absolutely tore them apart, 81 or 48. So for me, it is only those 2 games where he delivered, but they were important games. That's my point. That they were vital games that JSK had to win to make the semi-finals. So he's my surprise package, if you like.
Yeah, I think for mine, I had a few. But obviously Lewis was there, and I loved him. And look, I think I actually asked him a question at the presser in my Cape Town game, and he mentioned how bad a domestic season he's had already in PAL, and how happy he is that obviously it's changed and he's now on a purple patch, and he understood that obviously you'll get purple patches, you'll get lean patches, but right now he's on a purple patch and he's happy to help the team, which is I thought was a very mature response. My thing is rule of fundamental. My surprise didn't start the tournament with Sunriser, which I was very surprised by, but yeah, wild. But then he went. I wouldn't say, and the reason why I say it's a surprise is I know what Rulof is, right? And it was between Bjorn and Rulof, but I've always known Bjorn to be that guy, the man for the big moment, and Bjorn should get a lot of money. And if he ever gets out of the PAL Royals and gets into an auction format, he's gonna want a lot of money. And even if Paul want to retain him, I think he should ask for a lot of money. But that's Bjorn. But Bjorn never surprised me because I know Bjorn's got BMT. Roelof van der Merwe has it in spades. The only issue was that I never thought he was a tournament leading wicket taker bowler in a tournament where you've got Tabrez Shamsi, Adil Rashid, where you've got Prenelin and Keshav, who everyone thought would be great in Durban. In a tournament where you've got Rashid Khan, Roelof van der Merwe stood head and shoulders above all of them, and I think he played less games than them. And so for me, that's my guy. Yes, some of the balls were just very simple. He literally would bowl Yorkers off of that length and he would try to get underneath your bat. It was the most frustrating thing to watch, but it was very effective for the Sunrisers. And he kind of was their guy who would bring them back into games, especially in the latter part of the tournament with the way he was bowling, especially in that final. That final could have gone sideways for them, but they brought Roelof on and Roelof held them and he bowled well in the power play. He bowled well out of the power play. And I thought Bjorn was the best spin in this tournament. Roelof just went and showed everybody in that semi-final and final that actually he needs to be accounted for. And he went largely unnoticed in this tournament up until the back end of that tournament when the Sunrisers were starting to get momentum. So for me, Roelof van der Merwe is my guy. Big man. Lovely attitude, lovely persona. I think he's really great. Let's move on to the next one. Best uncapped player. This is a South African uncapped player who has shone. Pretty much like the rising stars, but we know we have a rising star. That's a youngster who's rising up, and that was Ethan Bosch. Tim, your uncapped player?
It's got to be Ethan. It's got to be. I've got to go with the guy that even SA20 mentioned. These tournaments, they don't always give the awards to the right people. They give it for for vibes sometimes, which is a bit annoying. They do. But I'm glad that he is getting rewarded for this. He's been the opposite. He's been the opposite of Lewis. He's had a fantastic season leading into this competition. He's been in form. He's been injury-free, which is a huge part of him doing well. And I knew he was going to do well. I knew it was going to be difficult. I knew that if they bowled him in the power play early on, he would get that swing, and he would get nicks. He would get nicks, and he would get bounce. Guys get bowled between the bat and pad. So I knew he would be a threat. I was just a bit worried that certain firepowers would overpower him, which like happened in the final. He was overpowered in the final, unfortunately for him. But aside from the final, he was absolutely magnificent. Even when he went for a boundary, he didn't try and do too much. He didn't try, okay, right, I'm going to try and keep it away from there. He saw that was a weakness of the batter. He said, no, I'm going to keep it there. I know I'm going to get a chance if I keep it there. I'll concede those first couple of boundaries. That's fine. But I know my plans. He stuck to his plans throughout the tournament. That sort of back of a length outside the power play and then in the power play, pitching up, getting the swing, getting the edges, getting those bounce. Good use of the slower ball. And yeah, absolutely. For me, the only problem for him though, is South Africa don't need bowlers. I tweeted, I think it was about halfway through the I said, Ethan Bosch will be a Protea soonish. I think it will happen. Soon. But because we got so many fast bowlers, it's not that easy to see him play. We've got so many different options to pick from that it's not a case of we've got a rubbish top six in the test. We need to get guys a chance. It isn't the case in terms of the Proteas. I still think it will happen, but he's had a fantastic tournament. Did everything he could have asked for. And as I say, there's a reason why SA20 announced him as the find of the tournament.
Yeah, look, I think he's like He's like AJ Ty in the first few BBLs. AJ Ty was nowhere near that Australian team, but he was just taking wickets. He was just metronomical. He was really good, just taking wickets. And then he eventually got his chance like 5 years later, or 4 or 5 years, 3, 4 years later, as a T20 specialist bowler. Even though Australia had the Cummins, the Hazlewards, and all those other guys along the way who were always just in and around that setup. So, yeah, Ethan Bosch is a really, really great pick. My pick is the other bowler who also South Africa doesn't need a lot of bowlers, but a guy who bowls at 150 is someone you need. Gerald Coetzee. I thought he had a fantastic tournament. He's not had the best time domestically, but I do think this tournament kind of made Gerald realize how good a bowler he actually can be. And I just loved watching him bowl. I thought he became a cult hero in Johannesburg, 17 wickets. Yes, obviously he's probably the most advanced out of everybody. I think more advanced than Ethan Bosch and everyone else. But if I told you Joe Coetzee would be the third highest wicket taker in a tournament with Archer, with Kagiso, with Rashid, with all these power pack bowlers, you would have probably wouldn't have put money on it. And to a certain extent, he deserves all the praise. Just like Ethan, they'll be in and around that setup, but obviously, it's Marco next, and then probably they may have shifted the dial in terms of who else comes in after that. But Gerald, you've you've done really, really well. And it doesn't
You,
mean like
you,
I'm
you,
picking Joburg Super
no,
Kings guys, but he did really well.
well, you talk about Malcolm silencing you. This boy silenced me. I saw him. I knew he was going to get picked for a start because you don't not pick guy who can bowl 150. You don't not pick him. That's they are gold dust because they have that ability. But I just saw him going to town. I just saw Will Jacks, Jason Roy, Owen Morgan, Josh Butler just
Ripping into
tearing him
shape.
apart. That's what I saw. I just saw a guy who he isn't expensive. He is expensive domestically. So I just thought, well, that's going to transfer even more against international opposition. But absolutely, he deserves the credit. He had a fantastic tournament.
He did have a
But a lot
bad
more.
semi-final.
He put a lot less bad balls than normal. That was the key for me.
Yeah. Just the
Yeah,
semi-final was a little bit tough, especially with him coming out to open the batting. That was just like Stephen Fleming. I know it was an ego play, and I like the fact that he put his hand up to want to kind of right the wrongs of that, like of those final few overs. But an adult needed to tell him, no, dude, we'd rather open with Matthew Wade, which they kind of should have done
they
if they
could have.
wanted to
Yeah,
accelerate the run rate. But yeah, great tournament. That semi final he needs to take away. And if the Knights get relegated, he's going to get a lot of money. Okay. He's going to get a lot of suitors because you can't negotiate South African domestic contracts like you are an international. Okay, let's move to best batter. I've got stats for this. I think this is statistically it's a statistical award. I don't want to do that, but there is one thing I want to say. Right, you mentioned obviously that Will Jacks did only played 7 games, and he's number 7 on this runs list, right, with a strike rate of 201 and an average of 38. Josh Butler won bat of the tournament on the sheer weight of runs. But there is a case that the best batter in this tournament, Tim, and it's just a discussion, is Will Jacks, right?
absolutely. Now, you could make an argument for that for two or three individuals being bad in the tournament, but on one Jacks alone, absolutely. If he'd got it, I wouldn't have batted an eyelid. Um, you just have to look at that strike rate as we've seen in this
Yeah.
in this
So we've got some
graph.
stats from Erica Morris, 79 from Twitter at Know Your Boundaries. She graciously allowed for us to use her stats. And you can see there Will Jack's 201 strike rate. And the next best batter is Paul Sterling at 166. He only played 2 games. Adam Rossington was 166. Hunter Clausen 164. Matthew Wade 160. Guys who played smaller parts in the tournament. And Josh Butler isn't even on this top 10 strike rates list. Quinton de Kock is, Duan Janssen is. Phil Salt is. And this kind of tells me that he's the best batter. But let's look at the boundary percentages, Tim. Also, top of the pops on boundary percentages as well. Paul Sterling somehow is second. It's actually quite interesting that Spinello Macagna is on this list, but these stats kind of tell you that it has to be Will Jacks. If he played the full tournament, he would have gone away with that prize.
And also, what this also tells you, for me, is why I wanted to use Erica's graphs, and it's just, is the problem with South Africa in this format at the moment. You look at those names. So there's 10 names there. Only 3 of them of South African.
And one of them played for the Proteas yet.
One of them is a little bit skewed because he only played a couple of games. I don't think he played more than 2, maybe 3 games.
Maybe 4 games.
No.
But yeah.
Okay, 4 games. But
that's good to see him there. It's still really awesome.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But the issue there is the world is ahead of us in terms of boundary hitting. That's the problem. We've got the bowlers to do the business. Our bowlers compete just as well as anybody else in this competition. But the batters, as the stat shows, is that the overseas batters are actually in a better than us at hitting those boundaries.
Even from a strike rate perspective, it's Klaasen, de Kock, and Duan Jansen. It's 3 South Africans and everyone else is an international from the highest strike rates. It is a worry. And to a certain extent, when you speak of the boundary thing, you kind of make me realize that actually that final wasn't a boundary fest. It didn't require... The Pretoria Capitals didn't make it a boundary fest like they've done throughout the tournament, where you have to hit higher boundaries. The only time that the Sunrisers did that was in that semi-final when Aiden went out, guns blazing, and the Lions had to step up. And to a certain extent, Reza did try, but obviously it fell apart in the end. That 96 was just as good as 100. And so you kind of feel like that's probably where the tournament's going to go. And the team to actually catch up to is the Pretoria Capitals and actually not the Sunrisers. If you look into the Sunrisers, I think you might just come short. And that stat kind of tells you a lot, because if you look at that, so if you look here, right, you've got two guys, Salt and Jacks, who are openers, top order batters, batted the whole from the Pretoria Capitals. Obviously, Paul Sterling was in Paarl, he just came through. Adam Rossington has spent the whole season with the Sunrisers, so he's very good. You've also got Harno Klaasen and Kimo Paul, but Kimo Paul batted down the order. So Harno Klaasen, you could say that's a number that works, and Quinny de Kock as well. Duan Jansen, I think that's a function of where he was batting, lower down the order. But if you look at the boundary percentages, you've got Jacks, you've got Salt at the end, you've got even Riley Rousseau, and Kusal Mendes. So you've got 4 Pretoria Capitals in the top 10. And yes,
I was just gonna say, for those who are interested, go and follow Erica. She's very good with her stats. She doesn't just do SA20. She's done the IPL. She's done a couple of IPLs, and in her stats, she points out exactly why Pretoria Capitals basically tops every single stat except for winning the trophy. Every stat you could think of, they are at the top. It also explains, as a Cape Townian, it also explains very, very well why May Cape Town struggled and what areas they need to work on. So go to that thread. It's quite a long one, but it's well worth a read.
I'll post the link to the thread in the comment section on YouTube, so you can just follow really nicely, and on Facebook as well, as also on our audio podcast. 2 more awards, Tim. Best bowler. Also,
well, we didn't do best. We didn't do best batter. We didn't do.
Well, who is your best batter?
We didn't do better. I wanted some flavour. So I'll do it short because I know we haven't got a lot. Yeah. But my best batter is Harno Klaasen, playing in that team which was incredibly dysfunctional, until they decided at the back end of the competition to sign good individuals, because they had to be up and down the order like he was, to be constantly under pressure, having to perform, to be the numbers where he was, striking of 160, average of 60. If you're averaging 30 in this format, you're doing very well. For me, not the most runs, but such a huge impact on the Durban side. And he played so well. None more so when they made 254, and his innings was just out of this world.
Yeah, and he's a sneaky pick. We're going to talk about MVPs. To me, he's my sneaky pick for MVP because I think of value. So I say if you take a guy out, who's the one guy you take out of the team and they look like a bunch of scrubs? It's Heino Klaasen, for me. And I think, I know Aiden's been great, but if you take Aiden out that team, they're still okay-ish. The Durban Super Giants without Heino Klaasen don't look great. Quinny was good, and obviously you'd be reliant on Quinny, but Quinny didn't have the tournament that we would have loved from Quinny to have. But I loved Heino Klaasen. My one was Will Jacks. Take Will Jacks out of the Pretoria Super Kings. They don't win the Pretoria Capitals. Don't win the title, and they didn't. They got to the final, but when Will Jacks left, they were already in the playoffs, so they were really on the way there. Took him out, they didn't win, and that's the guy they missed. And I was like, looking at that strike rate. I looked at that average, it's just like one run off of Josh Butler at a strike rate of 200. That tells me that this guy is out of this world, and I don't understand how England don't play him in a World Cup. But anyway, we'll find out soon enough. He's just unbelievable. Truly. He was like, outside of me being surprised, and I don't want to pick foreign players, he was my surprise guy. Like, I was like, who's this dude? Tim spoke about him. I didn't think he'd be that great. I know he plays for Surrey. I didn't think he'd be that insane. Best bowler. We've got some stats here, obviously, with the best bowlers. There are two guys sitting at the top of this. It's Rulof, it's Anrich Nokia. Are you going to give it to one of them, or is there somebody else somewhere down the line where you're like, he didn't play that many games, but he deserves a mention?
No, I'm going to be boring for a change, I'm afraid. I'm going to go with Anna. I love Rulof, I really do, and his contribution, just such a breath of fresh air. Just everything about his performances, and he clearly enjoys playing the game at his age. Still enjoys it, which is fantastic. But for me, Anna was out of this world. His numbers are just incredible. Leading wicket taker. If I'm just looking here, average of 13, an economy of 6. There was not a single batsman that I thought, he's got Anna sorted. He knows Anna. He knows what he's going to do, and he's going to see him off. He's going to tee off and take him apart. I cannot imagine. I cannot remember a single time that this happened in this tournament. You just have to isolate all number of performances that he did, but the times that he was going for 4.5 and over at times, he was bowling 3 overs, 2 for 12. I remember at one game, the last over went for a bit, but he was just absolutely phenomenal. The big key difference was that final, where you would have Bosch bowling. Bosch was bowling 135, 136. That's his modus operandi, and he was getting taken to the cleaners, put into the park, with the utmost of ease. The dismissal of Rossington. Rossington was timing it beautifully. Absolutely, he was dealing in boundaries. He wasn't dealing in any singles. He was dealing only in boundaries. That bouncer to Rossington was just too quick. It was just too quick. Rossington didn't do anything wrong. He got into position, got his feet in the right position, did everything right. It was just too quick. And it was 150. There's no substitute for genuine pace.
Yeah. My guy is the other guy who's on top of the mountain, Rulof. I thought you can't have another big match temperament guy like him. And obviously his economy rate of under 6 was just incredible. And yeah, look, I think South African fans haven't seen Roloff in a while, but wow, like like yeah, wow.
This
Tim,
Ruloff could be playing for
yeah,
South Africa. That's how good he's
yes,
been. That's how
as a
good he's
stand,
been.
yes, yeah. Forget about the Netherlands. Roloff, come back home. Last one is the MVP. Obviously, we know they made Aiden Markram MVP. Tim, is he your pick?
He is. This was a difficult one because there are a couple of candidates that you could have gone for. So you could have gone for Faf. Faf's numbers are incredible, and the contribution that he carried that JSK side through thick and thin, through thick Shiner not arriving on time, through
Yeah,
Pankiso, Pink
Harry
Pankiso,
Brook.
Harry Brook, Moen Ali, having to replace Pankiso with Simmons. So much was going on in that JSK side, and at no time did you think, well, Faf's looking a bit flustered. At no time did you think that. He was a man mountain, absolute man mountain. His team didn't make it to the final. MVPs, tend to be guys from right at the end, but
Yeah.
he absolutely could have been in there. You could have had Ruloff for his contribution, as we discussed. I suspect you probably would have had Will Jacks. I think if they'd won the tournament,
You
Will
was my
Jacks
pick.
would have been it.
Yeah.
Particularly if he had bowled more. Because he does bowl. It's just that the Capitals have a lot of bowling options. They didn't need to bowl him when he was there. But for me, it's got to be Aiden. Either the pressure that fans put on him, the pressure that he puts on himself. I know he puts a lot of pressure on himself. I know he feels that pressure because he knows where he needs to be. He knows where he should be. He knows he should be a first 11 in all 3 formats for South Africa. He knows that. He knows that. He knows that is the fact. He knows that he should be playing for South Africa for the next 5 years, non-stop. That's what he should be doing. He knows that. So the pressure was there. The pressure with the new setup, the pressure with the new competition, the pressure with having to lead a team with lesser known overseas players. Yes, we'll know 1 or 2 of them, but in general, particularly the South African fan base, didn't know a hell of a lot about them. And I'm sure Aiden didn't either. I don't mean that in a disservice. I just mean that he won't have watched Rossington. He won't have watched James Fuller because he doesn't have the time to do that.
Unless
The
if he's like
pressure
a
that
student
was
of the
there,
game.
the pressure that was there when he was batting, the pressure to win games, the pressure to show that he was the man to pick, the pressure to come on to bowl when the situation required the ball to come off, and they weren't playing Ruloff at the beginning for starters, and John wasn't quite working for John, so Aiden had to take on more responsibility. For me, it ticks all the boxes. He led from the front in every single contribution that he made within that side. So I don't always agree with tournament MVPs. I think that they pick guys who very much batter friendly, which is basically the way the game is going. But I think his contribution, you'd be hard pressed to pick another one, despite me mentioning a couple of others you could have. But so for me, it's got to be Aiden.
In a tournament of many all-rounders, nobody has been in top. I think he's top 5 in runs and top 10 in wickets, and it's an easier pick. Obviously, you could have gone Josh Butler, you could have gone Will Jacks due to his values, in fact that he left and they didn't win and they needed him. But I'm with you there, Tim. I think whenever he came in to either bowl or bat, his team needed him the most, and he found a way to either take a wicket or to scrape 30 something or 20 or whatever runs to try and get them going through. Obviously, it didn't work out all the time, but this guy had Sardal starting with Adam Rossington, and he also had John Smuts, who I thought were really poor picks in the auction for the Sunrisers, and it was a struggle for him. And he, like, even in the semi-final, they were not much for two, and him and Jordan Hanman, 100-run partnership. He went on to score that 100. That's the type of stuff you want, and he dug the Sunrisers out of a hole. It's just we hope we see those performances in green and gold. That brings us to the end of our award show. One quick thing, Tim. Out of 10, how would you rate the SA20? The entire tournament experience.
I'm going to go 9 3/4 because you can always improve. You can always improve. Nothing in life is perfect. But it literally ticked every single box that you could have, come up with. It didn't matter. It doesn't matter how stringent you want to be. It's done everything. It has done everything that Cricket South Africa wanted it to do, and said it was going to do. The amounts of money that has already gone into the coffers is there for the next 10 years. So it's done everything. The way that it attracted, it is sustained. There we go. The way that it sustained good crowd attendance for the whole 4 weeks was the biggest surprise for me. We saw with the Mzansi that the crowds at Cape Town and particularly the Paarl were fantastic, and at times at Joburg. Outside of that, it struggled. This didn't. It didn't matter where this was played. There was always a crowd to play. Whether it was a double header, or a single game, a Wednesday evening, a Friday evening, it didn't matter. That for me is the biggest take. That it managed to keep a magnificent crowd and interest throughout the competition.
Yeah, look, I can't. I have to agree with you there. I'd give them an 8 because I want us to be able to attract a little bit more of a high caliber international player, but I think that's going to happen with SA22. SA20 2.0. The Mowings, the Harry Brooks will want to come down. The Joss, the Ben Stokeses, that type of a caliber of international player. Maybe even some of the Australians leaving Big Bash halfway through, because I think that could only better. I think they ran an incredible tournament. You just need to sort out that whole playoffs thing. It just can't. You can't have a situation where number one has a chance to get knocked out and never have an opportunity to play again. But outside of that, I think it was a great tournament. Graham Smith and the guys did a really great job, so well done to them. And we look forward to seeing that. And the only problem is it's another year. So we'll be back talking about this in a year's time. Up until then, we've got West Indies, we've got Netherlands. We might have a lot of approaches cricket, but we've got a World Cup at the end of the year. The Women's World Cup's on the go, and we're going to talk about that as the weeks come. They did lose to Sri Lanka, and I need to figure that situation out. So a little bit of a longer episode, everybody. But yes, Tim?
Now, I just wanted to say, we will discuss it. We haven't forgotten about the loss. We promise that we will dive into it. I'm sure that we are playing today, if I'm not mistaken. Yes. So we'll have 2 games to discuss next week. At the very least. So but we will get into it. We promise.
Yeah. But outside of that, thank you very much, Tim. Thank you very much, everyone, for watching and listening. And we'll see you back next week talking about everything else in South African cricket. Outside of that, it's goodbye and lesale kakahiso.